Hey there, Garden Crumbs family. If you've been following this channel for a while, you know I'm all about finding natural, cost-effective ways to grow incredible produce. But what I'm about to share with you today is going to completely change the way you think about those so-called weeds in your garden. In fact, I'm going to show you how to use them to potentially double your harvest without spending a single penny on commercial fertilizer. Now, I know what you're thinking. Weeds? Really? The same plants we've been pulling out and throwing away for years? Absolutely. And by the end of this video, you're going to understand why some of the most experienced gardeners I know actually get excited when they see certain weeds popping up in their gardens. So stick around, because this technique has been a total game changer for my yields, and I can't wait to share every detail with you. Before we dive into the how-to, let me tell you a quick story. Last season, I had 2 identical raised beds planted with tomatoes. Same variety, same soil mix, same watering schedule. But in one bed, I used my regular organic fertilizer routine. In the other, I used nothing but this weed technique I'm about to show you. And I'm not exaggerating when I tell you that the weed-fed bed produced nearly twice the tomatoes. My neighbors thought I was using some kind of secret commercial product. Nope, just weeds. So what's the science behind this? Well, weeds are actually incredibly efficient at mining nutrients from deep in the soil. Their root systems often go much deeper than our cultivated plants, pulling up minerals and nutrients that would otherwise be out of reach. When we use these weeds correctly, we're essentially creating a free, nutrient-rich fertilizer that's perfectly balanced for plant growth. Plus, many weeds are what we call dynamic accumulators, meaning they absorb and concentrate specific nutrients in their tissues. When we return those nutrients to our garden beds, we're giving our crops exactly what they need to thrive. Now, not all weeds are created equal for this technique. Some are absolute powerhouses, while others are just okay. Let me break down the top performers that you should be on the lookout for. Number 1 is stinging nettle. I know, nobody likes getting stung by nettles. But hear me out, this plant is probably the single best dynamic accumulator you'll find. It's loaded with nitrogen, iron, magnesium, sulfur, and trace minerals. When you make a fertilizer tea from nettles, you're creating something that rivals any commercial fertilizer on the market. The nitrogen content alone is phenomenal for promoting lush green growth and boosting fruit production. Number 2 is comfrey. If you don't have comfrey growing somewhere near your property, you need to get some established. This plant has roots that can reach down 10 feet or more, pulling up nutrients from deep in the subsoil. It's especially high in potassium, which is crucial for fruit development, and it also contains good amounts of nitrogen and phosphorus. Comfrey is so effective that organic farmers have been using it as a fertilizer crop for centuries. Number 3 is dandelions. Yes, those same dandelions that most people spend hundreds of dollars trying to eliminate from their lawns. These little golden flowers are packed with nutrients. They're particularly good at accumulating potassium, but they also bring up calcium, iron, copper, and other trace minerals. The best part, they're everywhere, and they're free. Number 4 is clover. Both white clover and red clover are fantastic for this technique. Clovers are nitrogen fixers, meaning they actually pull nitrogen from the air and store it in nodules on their roots. When you use clover in your weed fertilizer, you're adding a serious nitrogen boost to your garden. Plus, clover is super easy to harvest in large quantities. Number 5 is chickweed. This one's often overlooked, but it shouldn't be. Chickweed is rich in nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, the 3 main nutrients that plants need. It also contains manganese, iron, and zinc. And because chickweed grows in dense mats, you can harvest a lot of it quickly. Number 6 is lamb's quarters. Some people actually know this plant as wild spinach because it's edible. But what makes it great for our purposes is that it's a strong accumulator of nitrogen, phosphorus, calcium, and trace minerals. If you've got lamb's quarters growing wild, you've hit the jackpot. Number 7 is yarrow. This perennial weed is another deep-rooted accumulator that brings up sulfur, potassium, and phosphorus. It also has natural compounds that can help speed up the decomposition of other organic materials, making your weed fertilizer even more effective. Alright, so now that you know which weeds to look for, let's talk about how to actually use them. I'm going to share 3 different methods, and you can choose the one that works best for your situation. The first method is making weed tea, also called weed fertilizer tea, or liquid feed. This is my go-to technique because it works fast and it's incredibly easy. Here's how you do it. First, collect your weeds. You want to harvest them before they go to seed, otherwise you might end up spreading weeds all over your garden, which defeats the purpose. Focus on getting the leafy growth and try to get a mix of different types if possible. You'll need enough weeds to fill about 1/3 to 1/2 of a 5-gallon bucket. Next, chop or tear up the weeds into smaller pieces. This isn't absolutely necessary, but it speeds up the extraction process. Then, stuff them into your bucket and fill it with water, leaving a few inches of space at the top. Here's a pro tip. Use rainwater if you have it, because chlorinated tap water can inhibit some of the beneficial microbial activity. But if tap water is all you've got, it'll still work fine. Just let it sit out for 24 hours to let the chlorine evaporate before adding your weeds. Now, here's where it gets a little bit interesting. Cover your bucket with a lid or some burlap, but don't seal it completely. You want some air exchange. Then let it sit for anywhere from 1 to 3 weeks. I usually go for 2 weeks. During this time, you'll want to give it a stir every couple of days. Fair warning, this stuff is going to smell. I mean, really smell. It's basically rotting plant material, so it's not pleasant. But that smell means it's working. After your steeping period is up, you've got concentrated weed tea. But you can't use it straight. You need to dilute it first, about 1 part tea to 10 parts water. So if you've got a 5-gallon bucket of tea, you can make 50 gallons of fertilizer. That's enough to feed a pretty large garden for weeks. Apply this diluted tea directly to the soil around your plants, or use it as a foliar spray by spraying it on the leaves in the early morning or evening. I like to use it once a week during the growing season, and the results are absolutely incredible. Your plants will green up within days, and you'll see a noticeable increase in growth and fruit production. The second method is called chop and drop, and it's even easier than making tea. With this technique, you simply cut down your weeds and lay them directly on the soil surface as mulch. The key is to cut them before they flower and set seed. Just chop them down at soil level and spread them around your plants in a layer about 2 to 3 inches thick. As the weeds break down, they release all those nutrients directly into the soil. Plus, they act as mulch, suppressing other weeds, conserving moisture, and moderating soil temperature. This method works especially well with soft, leafy weeds like chickweed, clover, and young nettle plants. The more tender the material, the faster it breaks down. One thing to keep in mind with chop and drop is that you need to be absolutely certain you're cutting before the weeds set seed. Otherwise, you're just planting more weeds. Also, avoid using weeds that spread through root fragments, like bindweed or quackgrass, because even small pieces can reroot and become a problem. The third method is trench composting with weeds. This is perfect if you're planning ahead for next season, or if you've got a lot of weeds and want to deal with them all at once. Here's how it works. Dig a trench in your garden bed about 12 inches deep and as long as you need. Fill the trench with your chopped weeds. Really pack them in there. Then, cover the weeds with the soil you dug out. The weeds will break down underground over the next several weeks to months, releasing all their nutrients directly into the root zone where your plants need them most. This method is particularly good for heavy feeders like tomatoes, peppers, squash, and cucumbers. I like to do trench composting in the fall for spring planting or in early spring for summer crops. By the time you plant, the weeds have broken down into rich, nutrient-dense compost right where your plant roots will grow. Now let's talk about some important do's and don'ts to make sure you get the best results with these techniques. First, do harvest weeds from areas that haven't been treated with herbicides or pesticides. You don't want to introduce those chemicals into your garden. If you're not sure about an area, skip it and find weeds elsewhere. Do use a variety of different weeds when possible. Different weeds accumulate different nutrients, so mixing them gives you a more balanced fertilizer. It's like creating a multivitamin for your plants. Do be patient. While weed tea works relatively quickly, methods like chop and drop and trench composting take time. You're working with natural processes, not synthetic chemicals. But the results are worth the wait. Don't use weeds that have gone to seed unless you're planning to fully compost them in a hot compost pile first. Spreading seed-bearing weeds around your garden is asking for trouble. Don't use diseased plant material. If a weed looks sick or has obvious pest damage, skip it. You don't want to spread problems. Don't expect overnight miracles. These techniques work incredibly well, but they're part of a holistic approach to gardening. You still need to provide proper water, sunlight, and basic soil care. Let me share some real results I've seen using these techniques. Last year, I used weed tea on my cucumber plants every week throughout the season. I harvested over 200 cucumbers from just 6 plants. My pepper plants, which I fed with a combination of nettle and comfrey tea, produced 3 times more peppers than the previous year. And my tomatoes, as I mentioned earlier, nearly doubled their production. But it's not just about quantity, the quality improves too. I've noticed that my vegetables taste better, store longer, and seem more resistant to pests and diseases. I think this is because the plants are getting a full spectrum of nutrients, not just the NPK that you get from most commercial fertilizers. They're healthier overall, and healthy plants are naturally more productive and more resilient. One of my favorite things about this technique is how it's changed my relationship with weeds. I used to see them as the enemy, something to be eliminated at all costs. Now I see them as a resource. When I spot nettles or dandelions or clover growing, I get excited. I know that's free fertilizer for my garden. It's like finding money on the ground. This mindset shift extends beyond just the practical benefits too. There's something deeply satisfying about creating a closed-loop system in your garden. You're not bringing in inputs from outside. You're not depending on products shipped from across the country or around the world. You're using what's already there, what nature has provided, to grow abundant food. That's real sustainability. If you're new to this approach, I'd recommend starting with just one bed, or even a few plants. Make a small batch of weed tea and try it out. Pay attention to how your plants respond. Take notes, maybe even some photos so you can compare results. I think you'll be amazed at what happens. And here's the thing. Once you start seeing results, you'll want to expand. You'll start looking at every weedy patch as potential fertilizer. You might even find yourself asking neighbors if you can harvest their weeds. Trust me, they'll think you're crazy, but your garden will thank you. Before we wrap up, I want to address one question I get all the time. What if you don't have access to a lot of weeds? Maybe you live in an urban area, or your property is small and weed-free. Don't worry. You've got options. First, check with local parks or community spaces. Many places are happy to let you harvest weeds. Second, consider growing some of these plants intentionally. Comfrey, for example, can be grown in a corner of your yard specifically for harvesting. Same with clover. You can even grow nettles in containers if you're careful. The key is to think creatively and take advantage of whatever resources you have access to. Even a small amount of weed tea can make a significant difference in a container garden or a few raised beds. So there you have it, Garden Crumbs family. The hidden weed technique that can potentially double your harvest without adding commercial fertilizer. It's free, it's sustainable, it's effective, and honestly, it's kind of fun. You get to feel like a garden alchemist, turning weeds into garden gold. I challenge you to try this technique this season. Start small, experiment, and see what works best in your garden. And then come back and let me know in the comments how it went. I love hearing your success stories, and I learn from your experiences too. If you found this video helpful, please give it a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button so you don't miss future videos. We've got so much more to explore together about natural, sustainable gardening techniques that actually work. Until next time, keep growing, keep learning, and remember, in the garden, What others call weeds, we call resources. Happy gardening, everyone!